She's having technical difficulties.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
let's see. Well,
No
grace and
problem.
peace, everyone. I'm Apostle Marcus L. Murray. We're waiting on my lovely wife. Please stand by as we prepare to get everything situated. She's having a couple of technical difficulties with this app. So if y'all can be patient with us as we wait patiently for her to come back in. There she goes.
There she is.
Can you all hear me? I'm so sorry.
Yes.
And we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, my camera just shut off. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Um, I appreciate everyone being on for this topic of the month for the necessity of trauma recovery facilities. I do want to welcome everyone who is new to this bi-weekly series, where we pretty much talk about everything pertaining to the community, whether it's social justice, public health, mental health, all of those things that pertain to marginalized communities. And so I just want to give like an introduction of what Love and Light Initiative Center is. And then I'm going to introduce our guests, who is Shelley Fleming and Marcus Murray. So once again, I am so filled with gratitude. Just with my guests tonight, and especially Shelley, for just taking out the time last minute for filling in for the guests that could not be here tonight. So I really appreciate it. Okay, so the Necessity of Trauma Recovery Facilities is a bi-weekly series designed to bring awareness to local and global issues surrounding mental health, community impact, social change in marginalized communities. And so this series was birthed as an idea to from my mental health facility startup, which is Love and Light Initiative Center, which is a top quality mental health service facility for marginalized women who are experiencing trauma, addiction, abuse, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's alcoholism. One of our causes is recidivism, as well as those who have been human trafficked or sex trafficked as well. And so this is something that's much needed in this community in Columbus, Ohio, and really pretty much globally as well.
Mhm.
And so I do want to introduce our guests really quickly. I don't want to take up all the time for the discussion, but we're going to start with Shelley. Shelley Fleming is an apostolic leader, minister of grace, author, publisher, and pastoral counselor. She has spent more than a decade laboring within the political arena of Central Ohio, seeking to cultivate a community that provided a voice for the marginalized and disenfranchised. At 22 years old, she became the youngest serving executive director of the nation's oldest historically Black political organization. In her role as the executive director of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus, she tirelessly worked alongside the state's African American legislators to formulate public policy that promoted equality for all. Shelley has participated in and spearheaded countless outreaches in her local community relating to human trafficking, poverty, and the sanctity of human life. Most recently, she has served as the executive director of the Women's Clinic of Columbus, lauded as one of the top pregnancy resource centers in the nation under her direction. And today, she is the founder of a dynamic counseling and discipleship ministry called The Well, where serving as a pastoral counselor, she partners with the Holy Spirit to put together again the broken lives of God's people. It is through the work of this ministry that Shelley envisions facilitating the radical transformation of the modern church, which is only made possible by the love of God being shed abroad in the hearts of all believers. So I do want to welcome you tonight. And
Pleasure to be here. I'm excited to be with you
yes,
guys.
so looking forward to it. So our other guest is Apostle Marcus Murray. He's also my husband, you all. So Uh, he is a global apostolic voice that is called to the realigning of the body of Christ. As a native of Columbus, Ohio, he is known for his unique preaching and uncanny worship and believes in the foundation, order, function, operation, sound, and mandate of the kingdom of heaven. He is the senior leader of Fusion Life Center and the founder of Fusion Global Network and has authored The Listen Effect, Don't Abandon Your Ear. In his tutelage of ministry for over 2 decades, Apostle Murray has established through the power of the Holy Spirit proven prophetic words and demonstration of healing and deliverance. He is passionate about equipping the fivefold ministry by preaching the powerful, unending gospel of Jesus Christ. He has formerly served as a correctional officer for over the span of 10 years. And so I do want to welcome Apostle Marcus, my husband, as well. And thank you all so much again for being here. You're on mute as well, Marcus. You got to come off mute.
Oh.
Ray got on mute to have a conversation.
Yeah,
I'm listening. Yeah, it's weird to hear you talking in there. And yeah, I got you.
Oh, okay. I got
Throwing
you.
me off a little bit, but go ahead. We got it.
Okay. So tonight we are talking about, for part 2, recidivism and mental illness. And we find that pretty much across not only this community, but across local and global communities where repeat offenders may continuously go back. And so we do see them as human beings as well. So I do want to emphasize that. A lot of times statistically and studies show that those who may reoffend may be dealing with co-occurring mental illness. And either they are misdiagnosed or not properly diagnosed. So I do want to open up the conversation. I think a great starter point would be with Shelley in possibly kind of talking about recidivism in connection to mental illness and kind of starting with that.
Well, first let me say that again, it's just a pleasure to be here with you guys this evening to put on my policy hat. I haven't worn that policy hat in a really, really, really long time. I do have a degree in political science, and I worked with, as you mentioned, legislators in the state dealing with public policy. So recidivism was one of the targets of our organization. And we were really trying to get a grasp on, first of all, why it was happening, and second of all, what can we do? At that time, there was not a whole lot of dialogue about mental illness. Like, I still believe that it is a taboo subject in marginalized communities, right? It's getting better, right? As the whole nation and even the world went through COVID, and we're still going through COVID, it is becoming almost a buzzword to talk about mental health. But there are still portions of our community, particularly African American, Latino American community, that does not readily recognize the importance of mental health. So, when we talk about recidivism, meaning just returning back to incarceration, why are people returning back to incarceration? There have been plenty of studies that said, there are outlying factors, right? So, whether it's poverty, homelessness, mental illness, things of that nature, though there are underlying causes. And so when we talk about the mentally ill, though, that's such a broad spectrum of people that, sometimes we think that mental illness is only talking about the person, who actually, I'm actually a ward for somebody who has schizoaffective disorder. I'm their guardian. And so, typically when we're thinking of mental illness, we're thinking of those people. They walk around, they talk to themselves, and they're doing this, that, and the other. And, their behavior is very much out of the norm. But the reality is mental illness looks a lot of different ways. Honestly, it has a lot of different symptomology, and we sometimes miss it, when we are, confronting, like when law enforcement is confronting somebody, who may be, breaking the law, just because they're not completely demonstrating that they're not in their right mind, they miss the fact that there could be something else going on. So, mental illness could be, something very diagnosable, but most of the time it isn't. It's just little triggers, right? It's just little things that happen, because of something that happened in their past, they get triggered, right? it could be something as simple as, somebody who grew up in poverty, and they have food scarcity, meaning they have concern about food, and so they get caught shoplifting repeatedly, and they get caught stealing repeatedly, and it's food type items. Okay, these are things that we don't necessarily think about. It's because there's a reason for that, right? They may not actually be hungry at the moment, but the fear of being hungry, right, can cause them to break the law. So I think, as we look at why people are returning to jail or returning to incarceration, we have to begin to examine what was the initial part of their life like. And it's almost cliche. It's almost cliche to start talking about how did they grow up, and when mental health professionals start talking about that, I have found that law enforcement doesn't really want to deal with that piece. I just want to deal with what they're doing right now. Okay, well, they're the product of who they always were or who they were raised to be. So you can't necessarily say, we're going to separate their behavior now from what the environment they grew up in. So I don't know how well I'm answering that question, but there definitely is a connection that can be looked at, and how we can prevent some of these cycles. And basically, from my perspective, is let's just deal with what the root is. The root is not necessarily breaking the law, unless there are people who have psychopathological tendencies, and that's those are different. That's different though. That's not who's populating prisons right now. We're talking about just typically, I don't want to even get into all of that, why people are in jail, but there's just if you look at the inmate population, it's not for what we would consider really highly dangerous offenses, right? And so that means that this is more of a social norm issue than we want to admit. There's hopefully that got to what you're looking for.
No, yeah, I mean, you make really great points, and I definitely would agree as far as dealing with the root of it, because you mentioned about poverty. I don't know if I believe you said something about homelessness as well. And so those, among many other things that are leading them to go back, because they know if they're in there, they're gonna at least be able to lay on a bed or some form of a bed, or at least be able to have some type of meal. And so I definitely would have to agree with that, is that we have to get to the root of it, and that, a lot of it is not so much as just a criminal offense, just, I mean, part of it is that, but then the other part is because their basic needs aren't being met. And so I know, Marcus, being in that type of facility, if you can first tell us what type of facility you were in the history of that, and then can you explain to us, because I'm sure you've experienced where you've seen people come back in because you knew that they were homeless, or because you knew they just want a meal, they just want to lay down somewhere. Can you kind of explain your background too with us?
Yes. The first wave of my background is I started out in corrections at a women's facility here in Ohio. Would be Marysville. I went from Marysville to Chillicothe, from Chillicothe to Tico, which was a very old facility here. It is no longer existing. It's more like a youth jail. It was what the detention center is now today. Then I went from Tico to the federal penitentiary, and from federal penitentiary to the detention center, which is a local, just where it's like the jail for young people. So I have a very broad years of tender in my time in working with in corrections, and really the reality of those years, I've seen more than I want to see. Let's just say that. And let's put it like this, to give you a better spectrum. What we hear down the street, around the corner, next door neighbor, Imagine that all in one place.
Hmm.
And everything that you could possibly be or could possibly think you did not know, you did now find out in one place. And so that's the legitimacy of where I've been behind my background. Now, your second question was what I had to give you the first one. What was the second one?
The second one where Shelley and I kind of piggyback off of her stating as far as dealing with the root, and a lot of the causes for the reoffense may be because of poverty or of homelessness. And I was wondering if you have seen where people came back, where you've seen their faces multiple times, and you knew it was either because of that, or maybe you've talked to them and maybe they've stated that. If you can kind of share those experiences that you've seen.
The myth of going to jail is always 3 meals and a cot, right? But I want to suggest to you that's not what it is. It's not the reason why they come to jail for 3 meals and a cot. Actually, majority of people that are in jail are coming because of the health care.
Interesting.
Because think about it, I'm in jail. I am property of the state. The property of the state now has to take care of me.
Got it.
I get free health care when I'm in jail. To be honest, most of them are homeless, or they've had situations where they're trying to really live. You'll be surprised. You find some of the most weirdest diseases in jail. But most of it is not because they're homeless. That's the myth. And that's what it was in like the 80s, 90s. But then when you got into the 2000s, when I got into the system of working, it was because of the healthcare. They get free healthcare. They've been on the street all this time. And if they need something done, where do they go? They do it. They commit a crime and they go into jail system. They have to take care of them and they get the best care.
Wow.
Because they're property of the state. Some people don't know this. That's why a lot of jails have gone to the private sector, because there's money there that's tied up into wanting to go to a system. But in the process of me going to that system, I get taken care of. I get the 3 meals in a cot, but on top of that, guess what? I get free dental. Some people don't know this. This is stuff that they don't.
You're blowing my mind right now.
And so when you deal with the mental health aspect,
yeah,
I can't afford counseling outside,
right.
And I can't afford stuff. So people think that people go to jail because of the crime. No, they're going to jail because I had a problem mentally, and I committed the crime. But in committing that crime, I get 3 meals in the cot. Guess what else? I get free health care. I know it don't make sense, but it is very much the truth. And we have to really look at that from the perspective of how our system has been built on, that there's a lot of people who are struggling, and a lot of people that don't know that I'm out here, I can't walk. But why can't I walk? So let me, I need to fend for myself. And the best way to fend for myself is to go into a system. That's why you see mental health facilities packed out, because it's tied to healthcare. I want to, and I say that because I've been through every spectrum of it, and I want to keep talking because I appreciate you allowing me to come on your platform. But I just want to make sure that we understand it's not all about the 3 meals in the cot, because the food is nasty.
Right.
The bed. Let me. I'm just being honest. The beds are paper thin. So why would I keep going back? I know why. Because I'll get taken care of. I can't survive out here by myself. My family can't afford it. I can't afford it. So I get free health care. And then I get free education. Then I get a degree, and I didn't have to pay for it. Yes, we pay for it. The state paid for it. That's why you got people that can go into jail and they come out with their lawyers. You got people going to jail and they get that. I can't get a trade. Remember back in the day, there was trade school.
Yeah.
I can't get a trade no more. But guess where I can go get a trade at? I can
And
be a felon, get a trade, come out and be a millionaire because of my trade. And so a lot of people think people going to school. Like I was telling somebody this. I worked in prison and worked in federal prison. Federal prison, what they call it's called easy time in the system. It's called easy time. State is worst time. But if you get a federal charge, that's easy time. So most federal inmates, when they come out, they are better off than a state inmate because they got education, they had crafts where they begin to build the skill. They went to culinary. Listen, there's a very much, and I don't say this to be like. I was in jail one day, and I was in the jail in prison one day, and I went in and I said to somebody, I said, "Listen, where did you get the skill from?" He said, "I came into jail, and there was an old man that taught me how to do sewing, tailors. I guarantee you, if you ask any tailor, a male tailor, who's very skilled, they've been to jail before." It's because it's just something about barbers, well-known barbers. They've been in jail before, but they got their license and they didn't have to pay for it. Education was free. Healthcare is free. Mental medicine that I need, I get it for free. And then once I leave, I still get it and so there becomes a cycle that if I lose something, I got to go back in to get it. That's where that becomes the cycle. So I hope I answered your question.
No, yeah. I mean, you gave really great insight into a lot of, and I've studied this, and so we have all the aspects of kind of this. The people that have studied it, that have been in it, and that kind of have done the policy work and all of that. But from the studying side of it, you don't find a lot of research that talks about just the need for the lack of healthcare and being taken care of. And so I think that that's a really great thought and something to consider for those who do go for that, because I would not have thought of that. I wouldn't have thought that's what their mentality would be. And then thinking just about just the limited resources, them being out of prison, but then going back in and having all access to all of those things so easily available to them. And so no, that's really great. I definitely I definitely wouldn't have thought of that. Did you have something that you wanted to maybe add to that, Shelley, of your thoughts?
Well, I think that what Marcus just said spoke to a much larger issue, right? I really think all of that speaks to a much larger issue. And, we can talk all day about disparities and policies and government and all of that. But at the end of the day, we're all believers here doing this presentation. At the end of the day, from my perspective, this is a church issue. Okay, this is a failure on the church to do what it's supposed to do and be who it's supposed to be. There's no way somebody should say my only alternative is incarceration. If I need, whatever I need, if I need food, if it becomes, and I agree with you, Marcus, I don't think it's about needing a bed and a meal, but if it becomes, I need a bed and a meal, or, I need access to health care, or I need, help with my medications, that those needs can and should be met by the body of Christ. They really can be. There are doctors who are Christians. There are myself. There are psychologists who are Christians. There are plenty of people who the Lord has equipped to meet these needs that are just not meeting the needs. And so for me, one way to look at that is, well, there's disparities in policy. And so we got to change policy. And something that I have routinely said, even as a former policy person, is policy is not going to change one thing. We have a million laws on the books. We do. We have a lot of laws on the books, but the disparities still exist, so it becomes about, when are we going to become good neighbors?
Right.
When are we going to pay attention, to your point, to the person who's limping down the street? When are we going to pay attention to them? When are we going to pay attention? Because people will tell us their stuff if we take time to listen to them. But we're just so busy. I don't even know what we're busy doing most of the time. We're too busy to really connect with people in a community the way that we ought to connect with people in community. And so they're having to turn to a system to do, what could be done outside of the system. So that's just a thought that I had as Marcus was sharing.
Yeah, I think that's really good. As far, and I would even agree as far as like the policies, because a lot of the policies that may change, um, I'm wondering if they necessarily serve the community. And then with the policies changing, there's still people in position that could, go against certain things
Hinder,
that
yeah,
people,
sure.
yeah. And so I definitely would agree with that. I'm wondering too if, because you mentioned about the healthcare, and then was also mentioned about um, just the need, sometimes the need for food and all of that. But I'm wondering if job placement would be an issue, and if you all think that as well. I know that, like you stated, and even I'm trying to think of his name. He went in. There's a show about him now, and he's now a lawyer, and he's running, I believe, for governor. Um, and he won his own case, and has won multiple other cases. And so in his case, he benefited very well from being in the system as far as becoming a lawyer as he was in prison. But then him coming out, because he was able to prove himself innocent. I wouldn't say that job placement was a problem for him, but I'm wondering if other people that come out, because it shows that they've been in prison, if that would be a problem, and that's why they also kind of go back. Wondering your thoughts on that.
So, I think it's one of the most. Okay, I'm gonna say this, and some people may not agree with me, but I think someone who has a federal charge and they spent time in prison should not have to be spent time in prison when they come out. Meaning, their violent offense keeps them from being able to survive. So you're never out of the system. You're still in the system. In fact, the only way that you come out of the system is if your record is expunged, which is really hard to do if you have a violent offense. That's number one. Number two, there is something called, in certain states they have what they call the 3-strike rule. But you cannot have now. You can't have what they call a person being charged double jeopardy, meaning the same charge
Twice.
is hit on them twice, but you give them a three-strike rule. I'm going somewhere. So when you have these two things that now are implemented to keep a person in the cycle of their life, then when you come out of prison, you go on what they call probation, which is another whole situation that we won't get into tonight because it takes it's prison inside of your own house. So when you have these situations and you say, well, you've served your time, did you really serve your time? Because it's built now. Once you're in, we want you to come back because you now feed our system. Now you talk about employment. When an inmate goes into a facility, based on the facility, you have different levels of facility. So you have level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you have what they call supermax, which is a person that only comes out. They're never around nobody. They are locked down 23 hours a day, and they only get 1 hour out to see the sun. So those are what you call high level inmates. And the reason why they're high level, so like Marilyn Manson would be a high level inmate. Charles Manson, I can't think of the name. Manson, he would be a high level inmate.
Yeah.
So because he is a he's a suicide candidate, which means he never has clothes on. He was also um he had a lot of things going on mentally that they
Psychopath. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
he was legally insane, and he was considered a psychopath, but they
Hmm.
could not put him in a facility because of his mental status, because of the danger that he actually was to society. And if
Hmm.
you put into, so there's two levels of prison. You have a mental health prison, and you have a actual max superman. He was death row inmate, so that didn't here nor there. So it is what it is. So when you deal with somebody like that versus somebody like somebody that's less than an inmate, there are levels, and they're graded. So when a person comes in, they're graded by their mental status immediately. You're not just coming in. You are triaged, which means that when you come in, we're gonna find out who you are. You're gonna see You're gonna see a psych. You're gonna see a therapist. You're gonna see everything, because we need to level you and rate you based on what you say out your mouth. So I said that to say this: there is a lot of people that do not know that the system is built to cause you to be cycled. The reason why it's built like that is because you're still part of their money. So when you're on probation, you're still calculated, because we're not taking care of you. But just in case, we need to keep your file. Your file lets us come back in and say, well, he's back in. We need to get paid for this. So they
Okay.
give you a lot of stuff. Not to do you talk about job placement. It's hard to get jobs, because the reality of the truth is that nobody wants to understand that I've served my time for my violent crime. But then we don't look at the story, we just look at the crime. And so a lot of people are, I consider, very much, they're just, they're people that don't have violent crimes, but they have a violent, what they call a violent thing, something that's attached to a violent crime.
Maybe like history.
Yeah, that not history, like it's attached to it. So when they have something that they're trying to get, that's why you see a lot of them when they go in jail, they come out with stuff. They come out with a degree. They come out with um a trade, because they come out with some kind of skill, because they know that the system teaches them that once you leave here, you're not going to get a job in corporate America. You're not going to get it unless you become corporate America. You're not going to. It literally shows them that you're not going to get what you want. You're not going to get any type of anything. We're not going to help you. You are enemy of the state. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that people know that you're a violent crime. So then what they do is they go in, get what they need, come out, and they don't need the state anymore. They don't need the system anymore, because they have a trade. They're going to work that trade till they can't work it no more. They build businesses, and some of them become very successful. The reason why that is because at the end of the day, that's just their journey. And a lot of people don't want to understand it. I think it's difficult. I think it's hard. I know men, some of the men who have violent crimes, they have the most, when because of the time that they spent, because they've gotten help, they've gotten mental health counseling, they've dealt with traumas, they've dealt with it. They make you deal with that stuff in there. And so you go in with this tough attitude, but you come out with this attitude like, I can't go back in there. There are some that do. I can't be like this. I can't stay like, because they go through the process of rehabilitation, which is what they call it. Really, it's just, I'm gonna make sure you break down that you don't want to do this no more. So I think it's very difficult to have to be labeled as an inmate and then come out and you have no opportunities. You can't even vote. With a federal offense, you can't even vote. Period. You have no legal say. You are literally like a alien in this country. But so they have to figure out the ways to do what they need to do. If that makes any sense.
No, no, it definitely makes sense. It definitely makes sense as far as like the job placement and you mentioning the expungement. as well. And then even, I guess, just like the consequences even after, whether it's nonviolent or violent. I know that, you have limited rights that you can necessarily have once you re-enter, back into society. I want to ask Shelley kind of the same question as far as the connection goes with those who are re-entering in job placement. If you find or think that that is difficult for people to do once they leave.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. If you have a felony charge, then it's nearly impossible to get employment. It is nearly impossible. Like I said, I was a community-based therapist, and I did what is called CPST, right? Community psychiatric support treatment. And so I work with adults and children. So the adults that I dealt with, employability was an issue for them. It's always an issue, right? For whatever reason, let's say, I'm thinking of one young lady who was, now her history was a victim of abuse her whole life, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and it caused, the trauma was so intense, as we know, it changed her the way that she processed things in the world, right? And so it made her violent, right? So then she got a felony charge. She had to go to federal prison, not a federal prison. She went to prison with a felony charge. When she came out, there was just nothing for her to do, right? She couldn't go anywhere, and she wasn't employable by Kroger's. You know what I'm saying? She wasn't, she didn't have skills, because when she went in, she was young enough where she hadn't really acquired skills. And then when she was released as an adult, with no skills, basically, and it was very difficult for her to find employment. And so when I hear Marcus talk about the mental health that they receive in prison, and I'm like, what prison is that? The mental health that they receive, and and I'm sure on different levels it's different, and in some situations, at least the ones that I've encountered, people that have been a part of, they didn't receive that. Like, I know plenty of ex-felons who, the idea of talking to somebody like myself, no way. Nope, I don't need that. Like, no, that's exactly what you need, And so, yeah, I mean, I think it becomes a huge barrier to say you have a felony, now we're not going to employ you, right? Because a lot of employers, are afraid of what that might mean for them, financially. So, if there are, and I do know, like, at least I don't know personally, I've seen movies or whatever, or people have all of this opportunity in prison to, to learn a trade. And I think that, if they're availing themselves to that, that's one thing. But if somebody is already comes into the system with severe, trauma and mental health issues, the chance of them really availing themselves to opportunities like that, even having the capacity to know that that's what they should do, just from my perspective and what I've seen, that's slim. So, I think it becomes a barrier, obviously, and so what can we do to address that? What is it that we can do to help them? They come out of prison, they've got a felony charge. What do we do? Again, this is not, from my perspective, it should not be on a government. And I agree with Marcus that it's a business, right? The federal, the penal system is a business. So they want to stay in business, right? And so, I'm talking about as a community, as the body of Christ, what can we do to assist individuals who are coming out of, prison? It should be exactly the same things they would have been availed to by the government, but we don't want them to be beholden and dependent upon the government. So we need to, be the ones who are teaching them skills, or giving them skills, and giving them opportunities, and mentoring them, and, providing counseling, whatever. That's what we need to be doing as well, So I think that's the only way, truly, we can overcome some of these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And you made a great point that we are kind of leading in. I was actually getting ready to ask that, which was how can we help either as community leaders or as impact leaders or spiritual leaders? How can we help those who are coming back out and re-entering into society, and lending our time and our resources? Like, what are ways that we can do that? So I'll let Marcus answer. Then we'll come back around to Shelley to answer as well.
I think one of the ways is just what you're doing. I think one thing we got to really think about is having facilities that are not geared towards making money
Right.
versus geared towards
Help.
allowing people a second chance
Yeah.
to come back into society, and then having people on site who can say, listen, I want to employ you, but this is your stipulations of what you have to do to get those movements going. I think one of the main key elements is that people start facilities, and I can name a couple of them here in the city, and they start out great, but they end up getting to see where all the money is, and they lose their vision and
Yeah.
their focus
Yeah.
on why they started in the first place, because the money looks so good. And I think if we as people begin to really community wise build facilities that say, listen, the money's there, but before I get the money, I want to make sure that you're fully equipped to be able to go back into a place where we have work study programs. We have where if they didn't get a chance to go to school in there, we have programs where they can be still under their guidelines of um, their probation orders, or where we now take the responsibility of what the court has given them per probation, and we don't make them feel like they're still in prison, but they give them an opportunity where they can begin to grow, and they don't have to feel um, inadequate or unsafe, that they're going to make a mistake in their freedom, and so I think when we give them a solid foundation on how to really build, and then we give them the resources. We don't just tell them, go look this up. A lot of facilities do that, and they say, go just look this up, and we don't have nothing in place for them to be able to hold on to what it is that they're doing. I think that's one of the hardest things about coming out of prison and stepping back into society. You are property. Think about that. You are property. You didn't have rights. You made 30 cents, 19 cents if on a good day, a day. That's a day's work. 19 cents an hour. Think about that. People make that minimum wage in the state of Ohio is $15 now. But an inmate's minimum wage is the minimum wage is $19, 19 cents. So you think about that versus a person that I remember we give something called tickets in jail, and that ticket could cost you your whole month's work.
Whoa.
You get what I'm saying? So you got to think about the way things. How are we going to bring them back into a place where we teach them how to have a bank account? Most people that are in prison right now were in prison when they were teenagers.
Exactly.
And so they don't know how to write a check. They don't know how to balance a checkbook. They don't know how to write in cursive. They don't know how to move. They don't know how to write a paragraph. Most 90%, I'm not 90%. I think the studies showed that about 65% of the men in prison could not read. When you think about these concepts and you think about the educational rate, like it's that's why the prisons then put in the library system, where they come out, and these men are smart. They're not stupid. They know, a criminal. They say a criminal is the smartest man in the world. Smartest man in the world. But it's different. Let me say there's a difference between a man's prison and a woman's prison. Notice that you never hear about women's prisons. I'm not going to do that tonight. This is a different type of platform. You never hear about women's prisons. Do you know why that is? Because women do not have a return rate. They don't. it once they go in, it's something in their brain that just keeps them. Now there are repeat offenders in that, but there's not a lot. It's not as much as it is with men, because it's something that clicks. I don't know what it is. I don't know why that is, but there are just some people, they'll be in for a day, they'll go out. That is, and that's why a lot of, if you notice in our city, well, I'm sure you didn't notice it, but in our city, a lot of prostitution has been shut down. So you're not seeing a lot of people coming back because people came on the streets, community came on the streets and start cleaning the streets up, pulling people off the streets and giving them real ways to cope with what they've dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't see prostitution like you seen it back in the early 2000s. Like you used to be able to go down Main Street and you just see them. It wasn't no ifs, ands, buts about it. You don't see you'll hear a lot of drug use in in our city. Why? Because they done went out into the suburbs. So so you have to really think of the concept of, with that what'd you call it when people come in the city and they move people out, and what's that called?
Gentrification.
Gentrification.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening is that the areas that were looked at as poverty areas, people are coming in and they're moving stuff out of the way and they're building the area back up, but people don't want to do the stuff that they used to do back in the day in them areas no more, because now things are being taken over. And so I think that's one of the key elements when it deals with that. You have to really think, what am I really doing right now to feed the system? And we got to stop thinking about our areas. You know what I'm saying? Our areas. I mean when I say our areas. We got to stop thinking about that, because we were given the whole area. This is one area. It's a city, but we segregate it because it looks like what it is. But there's no facility on the Short North. There's no facility on Cleveland Avenue. There's no facility on campus area that's really looking to help people who come from Chillicothe, who come from Leavenworth, who come from Marysville. There's no facility that's really building people up from the place that they were torn down in, if that makes any sense. So that would be my little 2 cents on that.
Shelley, what are ways that we can I don't remember my question. Ways that we can provide as far as those who are reentering that what can we do for them? Whether it's as a community leader, whether it's as a spiritual leader, if you can kind of give us some ways.
Yeah. So I think we just have to be really practical, right? And the first way that we, can help is to make connection. Right. We can't just continue to walk by people and, not see them. We have to be willing to stop, take a moment out of our, whatever, our busy lives, our self-absorption. I saw somebody post and really just see people. Right. And so once we see people, that means we get to understand what their story is. And that didn't require an organization. It don't require a facility. It just requires people to see other people. Right. And so that's the very basic thing. Just see somebody, get to know them, connect with them, and help them with whatever resources you personally have to help them. That every individual can do that, and then, then maybe we, have a collection of individuals that are going to, come together and do like what you're doing, to establish a facility somewhere in the community to help assist with whatever is going on. But I think Marcus made a really good point about a lot of people started well. There are lots of organizations that started well with good intentions, but they got caught up in the financial, the money of it all. And so we have to make sure when we're doing stuff like that, we have to make sure that we don't ourselves get ensnared. We have to make sure that our hands remain clean and our hearts remain pure in what we're doing. And so from my perspective, it's all about community. a community, and whatever that community looks like. I'm not necessarily saying a community is a specific geographic location or, a specific group of people. A community is any group of people that says we want to come together and we want to help one another. We want to be family across whatever divides that may exist. So, I think that's and that's why I say the body of Christ, because, we have an opportunity, and we should be actually the ones who are transforming neighborhoods and transforming, areas. That was our, job, to go and make disciples, and so if we can do that across, congregational lines, and instead of saying, well, I belong to this church and this is what this church is doing. Well, why can't every church in this zip code get together and we're saying we're going to support, Brittany's ministry, and we're going to do, we're all going to work together towards that end. Okay. And so that nobody is having to bear the burden of this thing alone, right? And then that way the financial temptation that is not there to do wrong, you know what I'm saying? Because it's equal. So from my perspective, it really has to be a community thing. And I really believe the church has to be integral in that. I really believe it does, because we see, again, tons of different organizations in the community. I'm familiar with a lot of them. And I'm not saying that they don't do good work, but, at the end of the day, it has to boil down to us as individuals. Are we going to see people as an individual, or are we going to see them as a felon? When you see somebody that, was in prison, are they a felon or are they your neighbor? And that's going to be the difference in how you approach people. So, building bridges in community, just seeing one another, being relational, providing some of the resources and that are needed to be productive in society, whether that be, job training, how to write a resume, whether counseling, whatever it is that's needed, as a community, if we can come together and offer those things, I think that's how we begin to change, honestly.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm not from this area, so I think from me being here, I haven't seen much of that as far as just the outreach portion goes. Maybe one ministry out of my time being here have I seen that where as the body of Christ. And I know that we all have different functions as far as like the fivefold goes and as far as like a church ministry goes. But I don't think that it's done enough where we have really played our part within the community and have sought to revive the lives of those that we see like laying on the streets, or we see people asking for money on the corner. And I know here in Columbus, remind me, hon, if that is something that's illegal for you all to do here. I'm not sure, but I know I've seen it here done before.
Panhandling?
Where they're like on the streets, like in the corners at the stoplights and all of that.
I get stopped all the time. If it's illegal, they're not putting them in jail. I get stopped all the time. Yeah.
Okay. Because I know where I'm from in DC, you see that a lot. So I know it's different here and there because you see it more there in DC versus here. But I would definitely agree, as you all both said, as far as something practical and, keeping that focus as far as this isn't about the money, or this isn't about me or my gain, but how can I help you so that you can kind of live again and you're not just surviving, but you're actually living. And so that's something that for Love and Light that we are aiming to do. You guys mentioned the trade training, educational, pretty much holistically. That is our aim and that is our goal. And so hence this conversation. We did have a question. It's not necessarily related to recidivism. So I'm not sure, Shelley, if you would be willing to answer this question as a therapist, because it deals with a narcissistic behavior. I do want to hit on it since you asked it. I don't want to ignore, or if you'd be willing to answer her question.
Go ahead.
Inbox. Okay. So do you want me to ask it, or I can put it on the screen?
You can ask it.
Okay. Fine. So it says, can depression cause a very narcissistic behavior? And can that make a child growing up to be very selfish and unconscious of others' feelings?
Okay. So no. Just a short answer to that. Okay. Narcissistic behavior, as a mental health professional, I really have a problem with the way people throw around narcissism. Okay, because they don't really understand what it means. So narcissism is a personality disorder. And so if somebody is narcissistic, or they actually have narcissistic personality disorder, they don't know that they have narcissistic personality disorder. Okay, it's simply the way that they view the world. They don't know it's abnormal at all. They're not doing it on purpose. It's not something they can control or they can stop. Okay, it is really how they view the world. That comes about as a result of severe trauma, typically. Okay, and so personality disorders tend to emerge during adolescence. So that means after that first period from 0 to 7, where that child has learned how to function within their family unit, is typically how we're learning how to function. Then something within that 0 to 7 year, that age range, caused that child to be traumatized more often than not. And then, that trauma has led to an actual changing of these are big words. I'm so sorry, but it's the only way I can describe it. The physiology, which means the actual makeup of the brain, has changed. Okay. And so now, so it really is the other way around. It's not that depression causes narcissism, but narcissistic personality disorder can be depressive. It can cause depression. It's rare because narcissists are, they don't think anything's ever wrong with them. Okay. And so it's rare for them to be depressed. Now, they may be anxious, right? But it's rare for them to be depressed. So I would say if you're noticing something in a loved one, I think they said it was a child, they were noticing something in a child that seems to not be off, then I would, as we've been talking about and even advocating for a little bit, I would get them get them assessed at the very least to see what's going on, to see, what if something may have happened, in their process of from 0 to 7, that would cause them to shift the way they're viewing the world. Now, I will say this right now, in the COVID world that we live in, I think a lot of people are depressed, and that's for a number of reasons. When you're inside all the time and you don't have sunlight, that's depressing. When you're cut off from people that you love and you can't connect, like there's something to actual physical connection with people. So if married couples are a little bit better off, but if like a single person doesn't have anybody else to hug them or tell them that's depressive, right? So we're hardwired for human connection. And so right now, I don't think that anybody is wanting to label somebody as having a depressive disorder, mood disorder, because almost the whole world that would be almost everybody in the whole world. Okay, just as a result of what we're experiencing together, and so it may be a little down, a little blue, we're all going through those types of things on occasion. And so a child, you just need to make sure that child is connecting. If they can, they get to go outside, get some sunlight. Can't say enough about vitamin D. You got to get out and get some sunlight, let them play, let them exercise, connect. If you need to hug your children. Seriously, this matters. You got to hug your children. You got to have physical contact with them, and all of those change moods, honestly. But if you think that there's something more serious going on, get an evaluation.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to ignore the question, and so thank you so much for answering it. I appreciate that. So I don't see that there's any other questions. I generally do like to answer any questions people have. But once again, I thank you all for being able to join us tonight as my guest. I really appreciate it. That was pretty much the last question, which was ways in which we can reach the community and tools that we can use. And so you guys really did a great job, and I really appreciate it. I really do. So for those that are new, once again, this is the Necessity of Trauma Recovery Facilities for Love and Light Initiative Center. I welcome you all to go to our Facebook and Instagram page, Love and Light Initiative Center, and check us out, find out our cause and our mission, our vision, what we are trying to do within our local community of Columbus, Ohio. We ask for your support in any way that you like to, whether it's sharing or anything of that nature. We welcome you to do that. Once again, I thank my guests. Did you all want to say any closing remarks before we get off?
Thank you.
Thank you. On this lighter note, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. I appreciate it. Well, I hope you guys have a good night. And once again, I'll see you guys for the month of February on our next topic, which I believe is childhood trauma into adulthood. And so I will see you guys next time. All right. Have a blessed night.